All right, so let's start talking about introductions and conclusions. First, we'll start with introductions. I want you to think about if someone immediately walked into a room where you were playing video games and they said, "Hey, don't you guys know video games are bad for you?" How would you react? Now, if you're a gamer, you probably wouldn't react very well. And if that doesn't relate to you, think about someone walking in the room where you're doing anything you care about and immediately telling you that it's not good. You probably wouldn't care what they had to say after that. How does that relate to your introductions? Well, you want to ease people into your argument. You want to get them interested and kind of slowly ease in so that you're not just jumping right off the bat with an argumentative stance on something. So that's where we start off our introductions with a hook. It's easing in before we start arguing because we don't want to be the kind of person who walks in the room and immediately starts arguing with someone because nobody's going to want to read that paper. We need to ease in and hook the reader just like you would hook a fish, get them interested in what you have to say. Grab your reader's attention, make them want to read the rest of your paper. Now, there are lots of ways to do hooks, and I'm going to give you a few ways. The first way is through a short quote. Now, this shouldn't be a quote that backs up your argument. It should be a quote that gets your reader interested. For example, animal testing. My heart breaks and my soul weeps when witnessing cruelty to any living being. Video gaming. Video games are bad for you? That's what they said about rock and roll. Year-round school. Summer vacation should get a speeding ticket. None of these quotes are good evidence for your paper. None of them provide facts and data and research. They're simply ways to kind of ease into the topic and get your reader interested in what you're about to talk about. Another way you can do it is through an interesting fact. So for animal testing, you could talk about how an estimated 26 million animals are used every year in the US for scientific and commercial testing. That's a big number. That's going to send off fireworks in my head as a reader, like, wow, that's an interesting statistic. Video games. The average 13-year-old gamer spends 6.3 hours a week playing video games. Again, an interesting statistic to help me care about what you're going to talk about. Year-round school. There are 3,181 year-round schools in the United States. So these interesting facts, these kind of quick, interesting tidbits are going to get me interested to read your paper. Another way you could do it is through a short story, and this is where I've told you you can be a little bit more flexible with hooks. It's kind of your chance to be a little bit more creative, whereas the rest of your paper should be more formal. So for animal testing, Libby, as she would soon be named, was one of the nearly 250 dogs and cats rescued last fall from Animal Testing Professional Laboratory and Research Services, Inc., after it shut down following a PETA investigation. After pharmaceutical companies paid the lab to infest her and other dogs and cats with worms, fleas, and ticks, she is finally recovering from a long journey. So that gets me to care about animal testing really fast. I have a confession. Short story, little anecdotes are one of my favorites for introductions and hooks. Video games. I want my son back, Melanie told the therapist. She had brought her 15-year-old son, Derek, to therapy because obsessive gaming had led this bright, once loving boy to fail classes and turn venomous toward his parents. So again, we've got kind of almost, if you're a creative storyteller, if that's more your style, the short story style of hook is a great way to start off a paper. And my last suggestion is a thought-provoking question. And I seem to see this one a lot. I want to warn you that it really should be thought-provoking. A question like, do you like summer? That's not thought-provoking. We all love summer. A question like, is animal testing bad? Well, that's not really making me think about anything. You want to really make it thought-provoking. Would you ever put an innocent animal in harm or pain? What if by doing so, it could save a life? In the amount of time you spend on video games each day, what else could you be accomplishing? Have you ever gone to Disneyland during summer vacation? How many other families were there doing the same thing? Again, I'm seeing a lot of questions for hooks, and I want you to always ask yourself, if you're starting an essay with a question, is it a good question? Is it going to make me think, or is it just restating the prompt essentially? All right. Once you've chosen one of those strategies and you feel good about your hook, what is the background? This is one I'm getting a lot of questions on. The background is just whatever information is going to connect that hook to the reader. So we wouldn't want an introduction that just said, would you ever put an innocent animal in harm or pain? What if by doing so it could save your life? Animal testing is critical for the medical field to find cures to diseases and develop vital drugs. We're starting off very broad and getting people interested and then jumping into a really clear argument. And it's helpful to have something in between there to kind of explain where your logic is going. So here's an example of the background. Although animal testing seems cruel and unthinkable when considering the pain it must cause some animals, a question people must consider is if a human's life means more. This is generally the reason animal testing happens in the first place, not because of complete inhumanity towards all creatures, but because of the countless human lives that can be saved through experimentation. Think of your background as your chance to explain to the reader what this is all about. We've hooked them. We've got them interested. What is the argument around animal testing, right? Like, what is it? Give them some context so that they understand what they're about to read about. If you've ever sat in on an argument where you don't know the topic at all, you're not going to care one way or the other because you don't know what people are talking about. So your background is your chance to give them that information. Now let's look at one more example. The average 13-year-old gamer spends 6.3 hours a week playing video games. If we jump right into our argument, it's kind of like when you're talking to a toddler and they're bebopping around the room and they can't keep talking about one thing. They get distracted. There's no connection between these two things. Yes, it's the same topic, but there's not a connection that's clear. If you added teenagers are at particularly stressful time in their lives and are expected to learn and develop new skills daily, they need ways to relax, but they also need ways to learn besides just sitting in a classroom. That's going to kind of connect this. Okay, random fact. All right, what's going on with video gaming and gaming and kids? And now let's connect it to our argument. Don't overthink the background. Just think, what information does my reader need to connect these two ideas and to know what I'm about to talk about with my topic? So at that point, if you know hook and you know background, you should already know claim pretty well. So you have created your introduction. Now, hopefully you've seen this image before. Introductions and conclusions are both triangles, but they're opposite triangles. Why? Well, an introduction starts out broad, getting people interested. It can be a story, it can be a fact. It does not have to be super scholarly or, research. Just gets people interested. So that's why it's the broad, wide line. Then as you move through your introduction, you get very specific. Here is my topic. Here is my argument. Conclusion is the opposite. Here's my argument. Here's what you just read. I'm going to restate it for you. Then I'm going to kind of wrap up in a broad way any final thoughts I have or anything I want you to take away from my paper. So the last paragraph is simply restating the claim and a so what or a call to action. What does that look like? Let's look at an example. In orange, we have our summary. In blue-purple, we have our so what. Even though there's some evidence to suggest that there are other factors that push children and adolescents to act violently, so we've addressed the counterclaim even, it is clear that the research also shows that video games are a contributing factor in the level of violence some kids show after playing a violent game. Now we've got our so what. Because the cost of having kids act out violently towards other kids and adults is so high, it is extremely important for all parents to be involved with their children when it comes to the types of games they play and the amount of time they're playing those games. So that's my so what. Why does this matter? Well, parents need to be monitoring their kids because I'm arguing that video games can be a negative thing. So why does this affect the society? Well, this is what parents need to be aware of. I've kind of wrapped up my final thoughts and why my essay even matters.